Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4 p.m. ET, and you have found us here at Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and we are so pleased that you are here with us today. I'm going to click over here so I can see all of your comments as you come in. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of going on 14 novels of suspense. My current novel is Her Perfect Life, which is on the door behind me, and my new book coming out in February is called The House Guest, which is sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. So we will talk about that at some point. But today I am so thrilled and honored to be talking to Clare Mackintosh about her newest blockbuster, The Last Party, which you will love for so many reasons. And Clare is here today. Let me tell you quickly that this is the first in a new series. So if you are here today at Crime Time, you are in the right place at the right time to be in on the very beginning of what I know is going to be a beloved series. The main character is terrific, and the supporting cast is amazing, and the stories are twisty and turny and wonderful, not to be missed. This came out November the 8th to wild acclaim. It is now a Book of the Month Club selection, which is just about as fabulous as it can possibly be. Clare, welcome. Where are you? And what time is it where you are?
I am in North Wales, which is very fitting because that's where the series is set. And it's 9 p.m. And so I get to have a glass of wine. Cheers.
Cheers to you. I'll just stick with my water for a couple more hours. Has it been fun this is a big moment, the beginning of a series. It's a commitment.
It is a commitment. It was an accidental series. So I didn't go into it thinking, okay, I'm going to start a series. It was simply that as I began writing it, I got a very strong sense that these were characters and this was a world to which I wanted to return. So I would say that the first book in this series has not felt hugely different, but the second book is.
Oh, well, we are all so lucky to be able to hear about The Last Party today. And one of you lucky viewers, one of you lucky blazers will be entered. Well, you'll all enter to win as soon as you leave a question or a comment. But one of you will win a copy of The Last Party. Not this one, which I am keeping forever, but the publisher and Clare will send you your very own copy of The Last Party. Just leave a question or a comment or just some general applause for the fabulous Clare. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome to Crime Time. A Mighty Blaze, you should know, was started at the beginning of the pandemic more than 2 years ago now by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all together, keep us all talking, keep you discovering new authors and new books, finding new favorite books and new favorite authors, and talking to some of your ones that are already your favorite. So we are so pleased to have you here today. Let me tell you about our author for today, and then we will get to your questions and mine with the fabulous Clare Mackintosh. I'm going to read you her official bio. With more than 2 million copies of her book sold worldwide, #1 bestseller Clare Mackintosh is the author of the multi-award-winning I Let You Go. And you have all read that, right? If you haven't, don't go right now, but you should read I Let You Go. It is phenomenal. Together, her books have spent more than 65 weeks on the Sunday Times bestseller list, and that is amazing. Her thriller Hostage was a Book of the Month, was the Barnes and Noble. I know I'm going to get this right. Barnes and Noble Book of the Month. That was Hostage, another one of her fabulous bestsellers. And her new book is The Last Party, which, as I said, is a Book of the Month Club selection. Let me tell you, she got a starred review from Publishers Weekly, which says, a superb blend of psychological thriller and police procedural. You're getting this picture of this now. A gripping portrait of two fractured people merges with believable plot twists, and the author perfectly captures the ennui of small town where gossip can destroy lives. Mackintosh consistently entertains, and Clare is in North Wales, where she lives with her husband and her 3 children. So we welcome you here today, Clare. Tell us a little bit about The Last Party. The main character is new to fiction, and we already love her. Tell us a little bit about her and where she came from.
So Fionn Morgan is a Welsh detective. She lives in a small town called Cwmcoed. in North Wales, in Snowdonia. It's a fictional town, but it's very, very much rooted in the place where I live. And Cyncoed has a big lake in the town. It's right on the border between England and Wales. And in fact, the border between those two countries runs right through the middle of the lake. Mm. So we've got this village where Fionn comes from on the Welsh side, and on the opposite side of the lake in England is a luxury resort of log cabins, decks stretching out over the water, boats moored up at the on the floating decks. Absolutely stunning. There is a lot of tension between the two sides. These are two very, very different communities. The Welsh village is full of Welsh-speaking people, lots of working class people. They've lived there all their lives for generations. The English side is full of very, very rich people who have kind of blown in with all their money. And on New Year's Eve, they hold a big party and they invite some of the locals. And the following day, when the villagers, including Fionn's friends and family, go into the lake for their traditional New Year's Day swim, a body comes through the mist, floating from the English side to the Welsh side. And that kickstarts a cross-border murder investigation, which, of course, Fionn heads up as the lead detective. And she has to work with her English counterpart, Leo Brady.
We'll talk a little bit about Fionn, because she is instantly, the book opens, as you said, with the body emerging from the mist on New Year's Day, which is such a wonderful scene and so telling. But tell a little bit about this main character. Introduce us to Fionn.
She's tricky. She is 30 years old. She's just coming out of a fairly short-lived marriage to a man who she's known for a long time and who lives in the village as well. His name's Hugh. And she's quite prickly. She's very acerbic. She says what she thinks. She doesn't get on well with people. She doesn't tolerate fools. And so she is quite a tricky person to work with, but she is fiercely loyal to her community. She's a really good detective. She's a really intuitive detective. And when this murder happens, her loyalties are really torn, because suddenly she is investigating her friends and her family and her neighbors. And that puts her in a bit of a difficult situation, not least because she also knew the murder victim. And we know fairly early on that she did not like him.
Or nor did anyone else. It seems
nobody liked him. Nobody liked
him. Go back though to Fionn, because you said that she's tricky to work with, and I think that you meant from the standpoint of being a detective. But I wonder from the standpoint of writing her as an author, whether she was tricky to work with.
No, she was a joy. She absolutely flew from my fingertips, and that's the reason that this is a series is entirely down to Fionn. And I have never, I've written lots of detectives in my books. And although I've never written a series, my books have always had an element of police procedure. And so this shouldn't have felt any different, but it did. And it felt different because of Fionn, because she's the only character I've written who wrote her own lines, who kind of came with me on dog walks and barged her way into the shower and told me what she was thinking and what she wanted to do next. And she was alive from the second she walked onto the page. And that's when I knew that I couldn't leave her after one book.
Well, she really comes through. We're talking about, if you've just joined us, we're talking about the Book of the Month Club selection, The Last Party by Clare Mackintosh, the bestseller, newest bestsellers novel. That comes through on the page, her vibrancy, her motivation, her desire to find her place in the world, which is so interesting because now she's coming back to straddle the two worlds again. You said that her voice just came out, her words came out, her actions came out. What was it like to write that then?
It felt very different. The whole experience of writing The Last Party felt very different to my other thrillers. And I think it's because it's perhaps a more a more character-led book, I suppose, which is strange because it was sort of very tightly plotted, and it's a mystery, it's a puzzle, and so there are lots of different red herrings and strands, and that's very familiar territory for me. But I don't know, there was I think so much of the novel is based around who Fionn is and what motivates her and her personal conflicts with the mystery itself. And that made it less of, it is a police procedural, but it made it less of a police procedural and more of a novel about Fionn and the way that she investigates this murder.
Yes, we absolutely love her. And I think one of the things that you did, one of the many things that you did so brilliantly in The Last Party, is that Fionn is sort of a fish out of water back in the water, looking at her old world, looking at her old world through different eyes with different motivation. And that's difficult.
It is difficult, and it's something that I know quite well because I was a police officer for 12 years, and I worked in a very similar town to the one that Fionn lives and works in. So I had moved to a small community and then was transferred to that same community. So suddenly I was living and working in the same place, and it's lovely, and there's lots that Fionn loves about it. She knows her community really well, but it's also quite challenging because you have to decide where your loyalties lie. You're never really off duty. You can't really relax. You know that whatever you do in the bar, on a Friday night is going to get back to the people that you're policing. So it's a really difficult job to have. And
go ahead.
And that's very much what I fed into this book, I suppose. So there's a lot of personal experience in it.
And also that she knows things about people from her past. And it's very difficult to separate what she knows from evidence versus what she knows just from history.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much information she feels that she can share with Leo, who's her counterpart from the neighboring force. And she the other element I think that comes into play for her is the Welsh language, and so the community that she lives and works with is a Welsh speaking community. Let
me talk to you about that specifically, because I think that is one of the glories of this book, and one of the things that makes The Last Party be so much bigger than a police procedural and so much bigger than a psychological thriller. I mean, it is really life-changing to read this. Let's look at the beginning is this marvelous map of Cwm Coed, with the line down the middle. You were talking about her colleague that works on the case with her, and that dividing line between Wales and England, and the dividing line between the classes, and the dividing line between the times and people's lives is so gloriously and gorgeously done. Talk about that dividing line that goes through the entire book.
So dividing lines, are huge. So Linda Oldsborough, who's watching, mentioned haves and have-nots, and that's another kind of contrast. We've got all these differences between people, between personality types. This all came about actually as a result of the pandemic, oddly, although this is not a pandemic novel, but every author I know has a pandemic novel, something we were writing when we went into lockdown, and this is mine. And what happened was the border between England and Wales, and I live fairly close to the border, became very significant. And up until that point, it had not been significant because the UK is connected, obviously, and you can cross that border and notice no difference really, except that road signs will suddenly be in Welsh as well as English. But during the pandemic, because we have different health laws and different governments who took different approaches, suddenly that border closed sometimes. And so people weren't allowed to come into Wales, or they weren't allowed to leave Wales and go into England. And we had lots of tension when English accents were heard in areas of Wales where they were supposed to, have stuck to their own side. So it was suddenly this this side, I suppose, to borders that we had never had before, and I wanted to explore that and think about how it feels to be part of one community, part of one side, and have people encroach on that, you know, whether it's a geographical border or whether it's just your sort of fiefdom, your kingdom, your street where you live. So we've got this enclave of very rich, very, very wealthy holiday makers on the English side, and they've got this resort called the Shore, which is very sort of closed off. And rather than coming into this part of the world and perhaps shopping in the local shops, you know, eating the local produce, they are bringing their food in, they're having it shipped up, they're, you know, lots of posh vans arriving with expensive products. So they're not making an effort to integrate at all. And that's something that I see a lot of actually here. It's something I'm very tuned into because I am an English person who lives in Wales, and my children go to a school where they are educated in the Welsh language. So all their education is delivered in Welsh. They are bilingual. I'm not bilingual, and I have to make more of an effort, I suppose, to be part of the community. So all these issues were what I wanted to explore in the last party.
It's so interesting. If you just arrived, we're talking about The Last Party, as Claire said, by Clare Mackintosh. You handle this so beautifully, and knowing what you just said sort of enriches so much the reading of this novel. I'm glad that all of you who will read this, not right now, but when this is over, will take that all into account. There's a gorgeous scene at a New Year's Eve party where one of the town guests comes and brings beer. And one of the Shore people sort of takes the beer like it smells bad and moves it out of the way and replaces it with champagne. I mean, that is just so wonderfully visual way of saying what's going on. I love that we hear from the points of view of the people at the Shore and how they deal with the townspeople and how the townspeople deal with the people at the Shore. How was it to be for you to be in each of those segments? Because you actually are.
Yeah, it's a lot of points of view, isn't it? We hear. I actually haven't counted, but I think there must be 15 points of view in this book, which is ambitious. But it's the kind of book I like to read. You know, Agatha Christie has did this numerous times where you dip in and out of people's heads. And what I wanted to do was look at how lots of people can want somebody dead, which is what we're dealing with. So when you're writing a murder mystery, there are sort of two different approaches, I think. And there are lots of nuanced ways of executing them, but ultimately you either present the reader with a total mystery that actually they've got no idea who could have killed this particular victim, or you go the other way and you present them with so many different possible suspects that the question for the reader is not who killed them, but who got there first. You know, that any one of these people could have killed them. And I love that type of book because it really makes the reader work. You know, it presents you with a mystery. You've got to almost keep a sort of a mental spreadsheet where you're looking at, right, this person had the means, but did they have the opportunity? And this person had the motive and the opportunity, but did they have the means? And you're gradually eliminating characters. And for me, the best way of doing that is to inhabit those characters and to talk directly to the reader so that we've really got the voice of that character coming through.
And it really does help the reader relate to the characters and connect to the characters. And I have to say, for all of you, if you haven't read The Last Party, it is so much, it's a joy to read. It is complex, but it is not complicated. All of you are smart readers. You don't need to keep a notebook. You don't need to keep track. The book will just wash over you and you will be taken to Coombe Coed with Fionn. It is interesting, though, because every character has a secret, and that juggling of secrets, as Agatha Christie did in all of her closed room, closed mansion, closed community mysteries, as you do with the people in the shore and the people in the village. How is it as an author? Did you know everyone's secrets, and how do you decide when to tell and what to tell and how to put all those lovely characters together?
I do a lot of plotting. So I do. I know everyone's secret, and I know how they connect with each other and when I'm likely to reveal their secrets. And I kind of look at it. The way I'll plan my books is I will. How can I explain it? I sort of plant a seed.
Yes, I want to know because it obviously works very, very well.
I imagine that I'm planting a seed. So that's the sort of the start of that secret, that storyline, that red herring, whatever it is. And then at various points during this book, I'm going to water that seed. Okay. So I'm going to remind the reader of it. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to flesh it out. Whatever I'm doing with it, I'm watering that seed. And at some point, I'm going to harvest it. And that harvesting is the reveal. It's either the telling the reader something that means it can't possibly have been that person. So it's eliminating them. It's creating alibi. It's bringing an end to that particular secret, that strand. And so what I do is I plot those, and I have lots of them running at the same time. So I'm planting those seeds in different places. You know, some of them won't be planted till halfway through the book. Some of them are planted right at the beginning. And equally, I'm giving them different amounts of water, different amounts of attention. And then I'm harvesting them at different points. And of course, the ultimate harvest is right at the end, when we'll have the final reveal of who actually did done it.
But I love that moment when as you read the book, the doors start to close. And at some point, only one door, to mix the metaphors terribly, at one point, only one door is open. And it is so much fun to see who is behind that door. It's just great. Is it fun for you to write? Do you feel that flow happening when you do?
I really want to say yes, Hank. I really, really want to. Not really. So different bits of it are fun. I really love plotting. And so when I'm writing, what bits do I love? I love the planning of it. I love the first draft. I hate the second draft, because what happens at the end of my first draft is I come up with something better. And this has happened in every single book I've ever written. And the thing that I come up with is, and it's not always just me that comes up with it. Quite often it's during an editorial discussion. So my editor and I will have lunch. We'll talk about things. We'll build on ideas. And one of us will go, oh, I wonder if that, such and such could work. And then the other one will say, oh, no, not that, but this. And the result of those conversations and of my readings will be a better idea. And that means I have to go and I'm going to throw in another metaphor now. This is ridiculous, but it's like a house. Okay. It's like I've built this house and it's not right. The layout isn't right. And so I've got to take it apart. And a lot of those bricks are going to stay because I'm going to use them again. And some of those rooms are going to be the same, but actually some of the rooms aren't. And so, and I haven't yet written a book that I haven't had to tear apart and construct again. And that construction, that reconstruction, is really painful and really.
But after having done it a couple of times, does it help you to know that even though you have to go through this brutal revision, that it's going to be much better? It's going to be great when you finally get through it?
Yes and no. So yeah, I do. Absolutely. It's all for the greater good. But what I've noticed is I'm no longer enjoying a first draft. So I used to love a first draft. Now I don't, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I know I'm going to throw it away. And so why would I put my best work? Why would I care about the prose that I choose when I'm going to tear it apart and those bricks might not be used? So I've done something different with this next book. And instead of writing a first draft, I have written a I wrote an incredibly long synopsis, I suppose. I planned out every single chapter, and I wrote, I suppose, 500 words of what's happening in each chapter. And so the result was about 25,000 words summary, I guess, of the action, so that I could make sure it all hung together. And that's what I discussed with my editor. So my editor didn't get a first draft with this next book in the series. She got this, I don't know what you'd call it, an executive summary of a book.
I like it.
And that's how we worked out what was what could work better. And, you know, and then I went away and I wrote the first draft, and I loved it again because I knew I was keeping it.
Don't you? I absolutely am in awe of the consciousness that you had of knowing that you needed to be thrilled with your book as you wrote it, and you figured out a way to keep yourself in love with the novel. I mean, all of you who are listening today, that is such an incredible insight into how a wise author's mind works. Other authors might completely freak out or just say, oh, it's work, I have to do it. But the idea that you psychologically parsed it out for yourself and figured out how to make yourself happy and us happy as a result is marvelous. That's
Don't you think that this is what we do or what we should do in all jobs? I mean, you know, I haven't had lots and lots of jobs. I was a career police officer, but I didn't do the same thing day in, day out, year after year. You know, when I got a bit bored with a department, I switched departments. I did a course, I gained a qualification. I switched up my working practices to keep myself sharp and fresh, to make sure I was the best that I could be. And this is a job like any other job, and each book is different. And so I think it follows that you have to change your approach.
I mean, I do think that writing, it's a wonderful idea. I mean, I remember so clearly the day that I finished one of my novels. I won't tell you all what it is because then you'll know. And I sent the first draft to my editor, and she called me a couple of days later and she said, get a glass of wine and then call me back. So I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be good. And she said, don't go crazy. Finally, she said, don't go crazy. But what if you took character X, a man, and made that a woman? And I went, what? You know, you can see the dominoes that would fall in every single way. And after about 10 minutes, I thought, that's the best idea I've ever heard. It completely changed the whole book. And I obviously had to go through so carefully and change all the relationships and all the reactions and all the motivations and all, you know, the triangles of how people dealt with each other. And it made the book such a better book. So we all know that somebody else may have a good idea. It's just how we incorporate that to make, as you say, in service of the entire book.
Yeah, absolutely. That domino effect that you mentioned, I think, is something that a lot of readers maybe don't think about. So if you think about your own life, and you think, well, okay, so in this story of my own life, actually I didn't go to that party. You know, in the first draft, I go to the party, but actually in the second draft, I'm going to cancel the party. But what if that was the party at which you met the person you went on to marry, and then you had children with them, or you moved states because they had a job somewhere else, and actually it changed the course of your life. And that's what it's like with a book, isn't it? If you move a tiny, you know, you flap that butterfly wing at the start of the book, and it can absolutely collapse the entire story. Now, it may well be for the greater good, and it will be great in the end, but it's a lot of hard work, isn't it, to rebuild it.
And that's why it's so glorious when you see the result and how the result works, because you have taken us to Kumkoid. It is a marvelous beginning. Let me tell you, though, we were talking earlier, and there's some questions about your police life, and I want to get to those. But even though it is essentially a police procedural, this is such a character-driven book, and the two main characters are so relatable and so vulnerable, and they're both searching for their place in life personally and professionally and together or not. Talk a little bit about, again, the divide and again the line between the two, Leo and Fionn.
Okay, so they're different in some very obvious ways. Fionn is Welsh, Leo is English. Fionn is white, Leo is black. Fionn's a woman, Leo's a man. And those are, fundamental differences, actually. Their working languages are different. Fionn's, the people Fionn deals with will be speaking to her in Welsh. And when Leo is working with her, he finds that really alienating because there are people talking, in a language he doesn't understand. He feels othered. He feels, left out. But there are more subtle differences between them, and particularly in their approaches to work. So Fionn is very intuitive as a detective. She really bases her decisions on instinct, on local knowledge, on the history of the area. Leo is at a disadvantage because he doesn't know the history of this area. He doesn't know the people involved. And that's both a strength and a disadvantage. It means he can look at it more objectively. It means he's not influenced by anything, but it also means he's coming at things completely cold. His approach to policing is much more by the book. He is a rule follower. He is someone who will do the job the way that it should be done. And that can cause clashes between the two of them. Oh, he's also hot, because I think that if you're going to write about a man for a year, then you might as well make him hot.
We know that from moment one. We know that from moment one. And there's also the clash of, are they competitors or are they a team?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are times in the book, for a lot of the book, Leo is the outsider because they're on Fionn's patch. But there are times when Fionn goes into Leo's world. So she goes back to the police station where Leo works, where the incident room is being held. And Leo has a boss who is really quite unpleasant. And his unpleasantness is directed towards Leo specifically, not the other people in the office.
Let me interrupt you because I'm going to interrupt you. I know, what a surprise, because let me save that scene for the people who read The Last Party, because Claire, that scene where we understand what's going on with Leo and his boss is marvelous. It's brilliant. It is such a glorious showstopper of a moment that I actually gasped. And I have to say, I thought you handled that so sweetly and with such vulnerability, and with Fionn's realization of what happened. It was one of my favorite. I mean, this is a glorious, fun, fast-paced, page-turning mystery, but that was a completely gorgeous moment. Do you remember writing that?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know that, I've said I plot everything out. Those are the sorts of things I don't plot out. So I didn't know, when I created the cast, he was just a boss who was rather unpleasant towards Leo. And really it was Fionn who pulled that realization out. And those are the bits that I love to write because they take me by surprise. And it's a kind of, I sort of sit at my desk and go, oh, that's why. Of course it's why. We couldn't see it, but Fionn was the outsider and she could see it straight away.
Loved it. Standing ovation moment for a standing ovation book, The Last Party by Clare Mackintosh. My last question before we get to the audience question. And I know the Welshness of it is so important to you. I was telling Claire you all earlier that, excuse me, I was in a bookstore yesterday and I saw a mom and her daughter look, and they picked up this book from the glorious display of the books right in the front of the store. And they picked up the book, and the mother opened the book and said, "What is this word?" And the daughter said, "Mom, it's Welsh. It's cool." And they took the book right up to the checkout part. And I thought, oh, I know her. I know this book. I love this book. I was ready to leap in and say, you need to get this, but I didn't need to. They had already decided that it was wonderful. So talk a little bit about the Welshness and why that was important to you.
It's important to me because it's important to the people of Wales. And I didn't know this until I lived here. I knew that Welsh was a language. I knew that Wales was a country, of course, but it wasn't until I moved to this particular area, and the north of Wales is very, very Welsh. This is where you will find Welsh spoken, in all the shops. When I walk down the high street, Welsh is the language that I hear. It's the language that all the kids are speaking. I didn't realize quite how important it was, and the history. There's some really shocking history that I can't possibly do justice to here. But essentially, the English stopped Welsh people speaking their language. They punished them in schools. They took their books away. They made it impossible for Welsh people to keep their heritage, their culture, their language. It was an appalling piece of history. And it has led to very, very fiercely patriotic, nationalistic people living in Wales now, quite rightly. And so the language is protected by law. If you are an employer in this area, you have to employ people who are bilingual. Signs are all in Welsh. And so it was important to me that I didn't just refer to Welsh in the book as being a language that's spoken, but actually we got to hear the language. We got to read it, to see it. And so you will find bits of Welsh throughout the book. And they're always bits that don't really matter if you don't understand them. You don't have to worry that you don't know what they're saying. I think it's fairly clear from the context, but you're not missing anything. You can kind of skim over those bits, but they are there, just a line here and there.
I think they're completely, I'm going to say, I think they're completely in context and completely understandable. With Fionn having toast and she's holding it in her hand and her mother says the word in Welsh for plate. And you kind of figure that means get a plate, honey. So I thought it was one of the things I felt was very smart. I felt very educated. I felt that I had learned something about Wales and about the Welsh language. And have you heard the audiobook? Is there an audiobook?
Yeah, absolutely. And she does it brilliantly. And it's a really great way to read this book because you get to hear the Welsh and it's read by a genuine Welsh speaker. And that was really important to us as well. So, yeah, I think, I pared the Welsh down a little bit. There were bits that my editor thought, that's too much. So we've been quite gentle with it. And I also employed a Welsh sensitivity reader because that was really important to me. I'm a big fan of sensitivity reads. And I know there's a lot in the press every now and again about whether this is all too woke. And I'm a massive, massive supporter of experts in general. If I need an expert for how you fly a plane, as in my last thriller, or police procedure, or anything I don't know, I'm going to go to an expert. And so for me, a sensitivity reader is just an expert in that particular field. So I had a Welsh editor read it and make sure that where I had made up place names, for example, that they were authentic, that I had used the language correctly, because it's not just about getting the words right in Welsh. It's, is that the type of Welsh that a woman in her 60s would use? Is this the type of Welsh that a 17-year-old girl would use? So that was really helpful as well, to make sure it's as authentic as it possibly can be.
It feels authentic. It's wonderful to read. It's an authentically wonderful police procedural, an authentically wonderful character study, an authentically wonderful story, a terrific book. And I hope long live Fionn and this first of a series. Let's take a couple of questions from the audience. Let me ask you, I have a million questions for you, but Sherry has a great one. Since you live close to the book setting, do neighbors ask if they are in the book? That's a wonderful question.
They absolutely do, Sherry. And what makes this even more complicated is that it's really common in Wales for people to have the same name. And so, for example, there are, I think, 5 teachers at my children's school called Bethan Jones. And so there are characters in the book that might have exactly the same name as someone, someone's sister or cousin. So yes, lots of people ask, but so far I've had really great feedback from local people, which has been fantastic.
Were you apprehensive at all, or did you feel confident about it?
No, I was terrified. And that was one of the reasons for having the sensitivity read, was so I had somebody from this area. And I was very, very specific and said, if I have crossed a line, if I have stereotyped, if I've offended, I need to know that. It's really important. And then we launched the book at the National Welsh Festival, which is called the Eisteddfod, which is a sort of an arts festival. So I got to talk to lots of Welsh people at the Eisteddfod and, explain a bit more about the background. And that was hugely important to me.
Wonderful. That must have felt amazing.
Yeah, it was really good and great for my Welsh practice as well.
Sherry says, how do you write the different POVs, and how to decide who gets to tell a certain part of the story?
So how do I decide is really, what does the story demand? So if, for example, I want to keep character A's secret, then I might tell a part of the story from character B's point of view, because that way I'm not lying to the reader. What I hate is first person point of view. If I'm telling you a story, but I'm also keeping a secret, that's unfair, I think. Yes. So I will tell it from someone else's point of view. How I write them, generally speaking, with this particular book, I inhabit them. So I think about who those people are, what their voice is, and then I sort of channel it. And they're my favorite chapters to write.
That's wonderful. You can feel that coming through. You can feel you're sort of taking on the role of the characters because the voices come through no matter who, so brilliantly. What Darlene is asking a wonderful question. Was The Last Party the original title? It's so multi-layered. I just love it. When you read it, you'll know. Was that the original title?
No, it wasn't. So it did. I'm really bad at titles. I don't know about you, Hank, but I find titles almost as hard as writing the actual book. And I didn't have a title for The Last Party for the longest time. And then it was called Still Waters, as in Still Waters Run Deep. And actually one of the Scandinavian countries still calls it Still Waters. Or Dark Waters, I think they call it. But no, we didn't have a title, and we had this huge brainstorming meeting, and it went on sort of online brainstorming for days and days, weeks even. And then eventually we circled around themes of parties and last, and we hit on The Last Party. And then it's like every perfect title where you just go, oh, well, why didn't we think of that before? That's so obvious.
It has so many layers. It has so many different meanings of The Last Party, so it's perfect. Well, you got there. I think with titles, sometimes I can think it's instantly, I just have the title. And sometimes it's just as you described, it's just clawing your way through a million ideas to come up with the one that you can't believe that you didn't think of.
Right? Yeah. They also have to work in harmony. So there are three things. You've got the title, the tagline, and the cover. And so the title doesn't have to say everything. It can sort of say a part of it. But the title does a lot of work, doesn't it? Like Her Perfect Life. It's so weird because perfect is such a sort of a happy, positive word. And yet, instantly that is a really, really threatening.
Because no life is perfect. And the tagline for that was, all she has to do is keep one secret. And on the cover of The Last Party, it says, at midnight, one of them is dead. By morning, all of them are suspects. Okay, we get this. We totally get this. It's marvelous. Do we have time for one more question? How do you stay motivated, says Sherry, when you know you have to always rewrite it?
I have a mortgage to pay and children to feed, is a really prosaic answer, but it's part of the truth. This is my job. And if you're an accountant or a window cleaner or a surgeon, there will be days when you're not as motivated as others, and you still have to go to work and do your job and do it really well. So that's kind of what it boils down to. But also I have stories I want to tell, and there are phases of the writing process that isn't particularly fun for me, but ultimately I am going to produce a book that I think is brilliant, that I hope you will think is brilliant. And that's why we do what we do.
Exactly. I mean, those moments when you're in the midst of writing and it seems very difficult, and then suddenly you just have a good idea. and we live for those moments. And then at that moment, it is no longer difficult. It is a joy and a treasure hunt to come to the end, as we have with our discussion of the last party today. Claire, congratulations. This is terrific. Dare I ask whether you have a title for the next one?
I do not have a title. No, I have a working title, which I don't think I've said anywhere online, but I'll say it now. It won't end up being the title. The working title is All Your Secrets.
Oh.
And it is, again, a Fionn Morgan story, but this time, whereas the last party was all based around the lake, this is up in the mountain, overlooking the lake, and it is set around a reality TV show that's filming in the mountains.
I love that. That is marvelous. I hope you'll come back and talk to us about whatever the book is called, whether it's All Your Secrets or whatever it is. I'm sure it will be another great Clare Mackintosh book. But until then, you all, The Last Party, imagine how this would look wrapped in holiday paper with a ribbon around it and under your tree or someone else's tree or whatever you put a present under. A signed book or an unsigned book makes a marvelous gift. And that is why we are here today, to tell you about Clare Mackintosh and The Last Party. Clare, thank you for being here this evening.
You are always such a delight to talk to.
Thank you. And you know I'm a huge fan, so I adore having you here. Thank you. Before you all go, let me tell you our last crime time for the year. And we have so many books coming up next year. You can't believe it. But next week, Tuesday at 4 o'clock, we will hear appropriately from Alexandra Benedict and her book, The Christmas Murder Game. And you see the tree with keys. Oh, and a little bit of what I think is poison. So I haven't read it yet. So we'll have to talk about that next week. But until then,
Alexandra is one of my favorite people.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. A vote of confidence from the fabulous Clare, and a vote of confidence from the fabulous Margaret in the back room, who has yet again to remind me that we have not drawn the winner. I always forget who will win The Last Party. And the winner is, drum roll. No, we can't win, Margaret. I know Margaret shows you that it is absolutely random. We'll just spin that wheel of fun one more time. Brenda Gaskell, perfect. Brenda, you have been here both times today, and we are so pleased that you have won The Last Party. So, you'll get some instructions about how to get, well, not this book, because I'm keeping this book, but we'll get you your very own copy of The Last Party. And the rest of you, holiday time is here, and you know what to do. Clare, thank you for being here. Good luck with this. And all of you, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We will see you next Tuesday. And remember, as I always say, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.